Happy Tuesday, everybody! So far, we've been using the distance formula to find the distance between 2 points on the coordinate plane. And we've also used the Pythagorean theorem to do that. And then we've got another formula called the midpoint formula that we've been using to find the halfway mark or point between 2 points on the coordinate plane. So what we're going to do today is we're going to use our midpoint formula in a different way. We're going to be given the midpoint, and we're going to be given an endpoint, and we're going to try and find the other endpoint that midpoint is in between. And like I said, we're going to be using our midpoint formula to do this. So if you look at our first problem, it says here, given the following endpoint and midpoint, find the other endpoint. So I have an endpoint at 2, 5, and I have a midpoint at 5, 6. So what this basically means is when I say that I have an endpoint of 2, 5, and I have a midpoint of 5, 6, if I imagine over here, here is my line segment. And so down here is this endpoint of 2, 5. Here is my midpoint of 5, 6. And this is the endpoint that I'm looking for, which I'm going to just for now call x2, y2, because that's going to make it a little bit easier when I go to substitute all of this into my distance formula. And what I'm going to do down here is call my first midpoint x1 and y1. And then I'm going to call my midpoints here, 5 and 6. I'm going to call this xm for x midpoint and ym for the y midpoint. So using my midpoint formula, which is x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and y1 plus y2 divided by 2, I'm going to take this formula and simply plug in what I can of the information that I know and use it to solve for x2 and y2. So this begins with me rewriting both sides of the midpoint formula. So I'm going to say xm equals x1 plus x2 divided by 2. So as I've already labeled xm as 5, I'm going to simply replace the xm with 5. As I've already labeled 2 as my x1, so I'm going to have 5 equals 2 plus x2 is what I'm trying to solve, which is the x-coordinate of the other endpoint, and I'm going to divide all of that by 2. Now my next step is simply to cross multiply, which is what we've been doing since the start of the year. So when I cross multiply those numbers, that gives me 10 equals 2 plus x2, and then I subtract the 2 from both sides, and so x2 is going to equal 8. So up here, I will label my first x value of the endpoint 8. And then I'm going to do the same thing to find my y-coordinate of the endpoint that I did to find the x-coordinate of the endpoint. So my y midpoint, or ym, equals 6. My y sub 1, or y1, is 5. y2 is what I'm looking for, and I'm dividing everything by 2. So cross multiply. Subtract 5 from both sides. So now I know that my y2 is going to be 7. So my endpoint for this particular line segment that I didn't know is 8, 7. All right, so let's look at the next one. It says, given the following endpoint and midpoint, find the other endpoint. So I have an endpoint of 8, negative 9, and a midpoint of 4, negative 2. All right, so same thing. Let's just know here that the endpoint that I have is 8, negative 9. And then the midpoint is 4, -2. And for the sake of clarity, again, I'm going to come over here and sketch a line segment. And then my midpoint is here. All right, so if we just go through and label everything, so there's x1 and y1. I have xm, ym, and then x2 and y2. So when I begin solving for x2, I begin with setting xm equal to my distance, my midpoint formula. So xm in this particular case was 4. My x1 is 8. x2 is what I'm trying to solve for. All of that divided by 2. So I know up here that my first number, my x value, is going to be 0. Then again, I take ym. So my ym in this particular situation is 2, because that's the midpoint. y1 is -9 plus y2, which is what I'm looking for. All of that divided by 2. So now I simply add the opposite. So the opposite of subtracting 9 is adding 9 to both sides. So -4 plus 9 is 5. So that means my ordered pair solution is 0, 5. So the other endpoint for this line is 0, 5. So at this point, if you understand what we're doing, feel free to jump to the assignment. If not, you can stay on with me for the third example. All right, so for the third example, it says, given the following endpoint and midpoint, find the other endpoint. So I have the endpoint of 9, -4, and the midpoint of 2, -4. Again, for the sake of clarity, we'll just sketch a line over here. All right, so here we go. xm is x1 plus x2 divided by 2. So my xm there is going to be 2. So that's going to give me 9 plus x2, which is what I'm looking for. All of that divided by 2. So I cross multiply. 2 times 2 is 4. Then I'll subtract 9 from both sides. And that gives me my x coordinate for that endpoint, which is -5. All right, so my ym here is -4. So y1 is going to be negative 4 plus y2 divided by 2. All right. All right, so go ahead and start your assignment. You should be able to now. If you need additional help, I will be up on Google Meet during my normal hours, or you can message me for different hours if you need them. Have a great day. Goodbye.